Let's talk about display brightness for a little bit. Apple has a couple displays out now with mini LED backlighting and zones. Specifically, I'm talking about the Pro Display XDR, which has a peak brightness, according to Apple, of about 500 nits. And also Apple's new 16-inch and 14-inch MacBook Pros with the M1 and M1 Max. Those have a max brightness of 500 nits, or operating brightness of 500 nits, I guess is what I should say, because in reality, these displays are capable of achieving a much higher brightness, more than 3 times brighter in specific situations, thanks to that mini LED backlighting and the zones and all that fun sort of stuff. They actually can display HDR content at 1,000 nits or higher and have a peak brightness of about 1,600 nits in some situations. Specifically, that brightness is typically saved for when you're watching HDR video or when you're using some metal-based applications. And something interesting came out this week, a little bit of software that I wanted to share with you in case you have one of those displays that allows you to achieve that full brightness when and where you want. Developers Jordy Bruin and Ben Haraway found a way to actually build a Mac utility app called Vivid, and I'll have a link to it in the show notes at maccast.com, that they say uses a combination of Metal, Carbon, Cocoa, Swift, Swift UI, and even some C code. I have a feeling that's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but maybe they're using all those technologies to achieve this. But they say that will allow their app to let you get the full brightness out of your display. Now, Infinite Loop, the website where I found out about this, notes that the app is not 100% perfect. They noticed that in jumping between spaces on the Mac, it can swap back and take a moment for the higher brightness to kick back in. They also noted that certain colors and certain video content can appear a little bit off. So it's maybe not a perfect thing, and probably why Apple doesn't want you running at 1,000 to 1,600 nits full bore all the time. But why would you want to display that bright? I would guess the main reason would be to combat sunlight or glare. It's definitely not for color accuracy, because if you're into that, you actually want a lower peak brightness, somewhere around, I think, 150, 200 nits, somewhere in that space. So, there's that going on. I have to admit, when I heard about this, I had to wonder, if you run your display at that maximum brightness, are you going to wear things out quicker, or is it going to potentially cause any damage? The developers claim that the app is, quote, not likely to pose any risk to your hardware. They do note, though, it does have a small impact on performance, and that it will have a pretty serious impact on your battery life. And that's not surprising. If you're on a notebook and you're running it that bright, yeah, that's going to suck battery pretty quickly. But it's an interesting new utility, and I thought it was pretty cool, so I wanted to bring it up and tell you about it in case you hadn't seen it yet. So if you do want a way brighter display and you have an M1 Pro or M1 Max MacBook Pro, or if you're lucky enough to have an Apple Pro Display XDR, you can pick up Vivid. It's just $16 US, and it's a one-time purchase, and they even have a try before you buy option. And there's even a kind of split screen mode where you can see the original brightness versus the adjusted brightness. So you can play around with it, see if it's something that you think you can use. And again, I'll have links to it in the show notes at maccast.com.